guys, I am out here beside my herb garden today, getting ready to work in here. I'm a little bit behind on my herb garden. It really needs weeded out. It needs harvested, and I have to admit that I haven't planted my annuals for the year in here. I need to get my basil, my parsley planted. I'm not sure what else I'm going to put in here quite yet, but we'll find out by the end of this video. My poor husband's back. Alan's back's been out, if you don't keep up with our Facebook page, and so we are struggling to keep up with the farm work this year. But I decided to share this video because this is just real life on the farm. There is no such thing as being caught up with the work. I'd like to see the farm that can keep up with the work. If they don't have any extra workers, I would be seriously impressed. But I also wanted to share this video, not just because it's just real life here on the farm, but also because I wanted to show you all that if you've been thinking about doing an herb garden, it is not too late. It is beginning of July right now, and I know from experience that I will have plenty of time to harvest, to plant, grow, and get several harvests out of my annuals, such as the basil and the parsley. So let's go ahead and get this garden tidied up, which will make me feel a whole lot better, and let's see what we can find to plant in here. Scaring up all types of critters. They're a decent sized praying mantis. I definitely believe that you become acclimated to the temperatures in your area, or if you work outside. I know when I am working outside in this heat, I try not to spend too much time cooling off in the air conditioning. So if I go inside to get a drink, I try to get a drink and have a sit down for a minute, and then come straight back outside, because going back and forth in that air conditioning can wreak havoc on your system, makes it difficult to go back outside. Sometimes I just take my water out on the porch and drink it on the porch in the shade rather than sit in the air conditioning. That's a good idea too. But I have been sick the past 3 days, and I'm not over it yet, but I thought I would try to get outside a little bit today and do some work. And I am feeling those 3 days of being inside and not being 100% for sure. It's hot today. I don't know if you can see the sweat dripping off of me or not, but I am literally watering this garden with my sweat. That's called farming efficiency. All right. She is all cleaned out. Okay, so there are about 5 things to consider when you're getting ready to plant your herb garden, when you're laying everything out, deciding which herbs are going to go in which spots. So the first thing is knowing whether you're planting an annual or a perennial. I have annuals and perennials in my garden, but I have spaces in between them. I am eventually thinking about, or I will probably eventually create just a perennial garden here on the side of my house and put my annuals as companion plants to my vegetables in my vegetable garden. However, right now I just traditionally had both perennials and annuals in this garden over here, so that's what I'm going to do this year. But when you're planting your annuals and when you're planting your herb garden, just know that the annuals you have to dig up every year. So you're pulling those out, you're digging holes and replanting those annuals the next year. Perennials, of course, stay in the ground, and so it's just if your plants are close together, you don't want to be digging annuals out next to the root system of a perennial, for example. So either make sure that you leave adequate spacing so you're not disturbing the roots of the perennials when you're digging up or replanting your annuals every year, or keep them separate. Maybe have an annual garden and a perennial garden, put perennials at one end, annuals at the other. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing that you want to consider is the location requirements. So think sun, soil, and water needs. So for example, my mint likes a little bit shadier area. So I have it on the front of the house where we get sun from the morning, early morning, up until about noon, 1 o'clock, when the sun finally makes it past over on top of the house. However, my Mediterranean herbs really like full sun, and the sun runs alongside the house. So my herb garden alongside the house is a great area for my full sun herbs, like those Mediterranean herbs, like oregano, thyme, sage, things like that. Also, for example, parsley versus rosemary. Rosemary does not like it to be very wet. In fact, it actually prefers a little bit drier soil. But parsley really requires a lot of water. If it doesn't get enough water, you'll see it drooping, and it will lose a lot of its firmness of the leaves and the stems. So, you know, if I get heavy rains around here, of course, I'm just kind of out of luck as far as the rosemary goes. But because we do tend to have a pretty dry season for the summer in West Virginia here, I can leave the rosemary alone and then just water my parsley as needed. If those two things are close together, then I'm overwatering my rosemary. It's getting some of that water that I'm giving to the parsley, and I may be overwatering my rosemary. So think about things like that. The third thing to consider is how quickly they grow and whether they bush out or tend to grow up. You don't want your plants competing for space too much. For example, like basil tends to, in my area anyway, basil really grows very quickly and it recovers quickly after you cut it. However, my rosemary takes longer to grow. So I wouldn't want to plant those two things close together necessarily, at least not without adequate spacing, because my basil will probably shade out my rosemary, for example. The fourth thing to consider is the nutrients. What kind of nutrients are they putting into the soil? What kind of nutrients are they taking out of the soil? And this is something you're going to have to Google for each of your herbs. But for example, fennel, if you plant fennel in your garden as an herb, it tends to release a chemical into the soil that is not good for some plants, and it can inhibit the growth of other plants. So you have to be careful what are they putting in, what are they taking out. And the last thing to consider is flowering and the possibility of cross-pollination. So for example, dill and fennel can cross-pollinate. Now, cross-pollination is not going to affect your plants for that year, but it will affect your seeds. So like if you're trying to let your dill go to seed and collect those seeds, it may affect, any type of cross-pollination may affect the taste of those seeds. Or if you're saving your seeds for the next year and you're going to replant from the seeds that you've harvested, then it will impact your fruiting for next year. So for example, if your dill and your fennel cross-pollinate, then your dill may not have the same flavor when you replant and harvest it from the next year. So those are some things to consider when you're planning out where to put your herbs.
Alright everybody, I've got everything planted. Next step is to do some harvesting. I need to harvest my chives, my oregano, which is already flowering. I kind of need to sift through that and find pieces that aren't flowering because that does alter the taste a little bit. I got 5 purple basil plants in the ground. I need to harvest some thyme. They're hard to see because these are plants that died and are coming back, but I do have 2 parsleys that I had in the greenhouse that I was able to use. This is my garden sage. It is pretty droopy. We are kind of in a partial drought right now. I need to get that a shot of water tonight. And I did plant 2 more sage plants because I just wanted a little more sage in there. Just some regular garden sage. And then I also did 4 marjorams. I have an inevitable piece back here that I could plant. Of course, I do have to keep underneath the crawl space door. I have to keep that clear. But I do have a little space here that I could plant. But truth be told, where it's the end of the season, the plants that I have in the ground now are ones that I just sifted through the greenhouse for, and that's kind of I just took from what I had left. So this is what's getting done in this garden here this year. I do have on the front of my house a tea garden, but we're going to show you that in a couple of weeks here. So I appreciate you all coming with me to plant my herb garden. And I hope that if you all have been wanting to do an herb garden and you just haven't been sure, or you think it's too late in the season, that you just go ahead and know that it is okay to do, and you're going to do great at it. Go ahead and get those plants in the ground, dig up a little spot, and get you an herb garden started. You'll be happy you did.